Hey guys, it's Karina with Karina Loves to Plan. Welcome back to my channel. So here I am back for days 9 through 15 of 30 Inks 30 days. If you haven't watched my first 8 days of 30 Inks 30 days, I'll put it up in the corner here. Let's get started. I read that as 3 oinks. The first ink for day 9 is Wearingeul Jane Eyre, and this was one that I purchased actually off of Van Ness. So here I am putting a drop down on the paper and then swirling it with my ink sample vial and just writing it in with my little pen designs pastel primary manipulation. I did get a drop on day 10, unfortunately. And then writing it here kind of in the same format as I would write my currently inked. So I do a little, I guess, square or swatch with my pen and then write out the name of the ink. Really pretty color, and I was convinced to buy this sample after seeing it on Amanda B's channel and I believe Marie Rousseau's channel. It's such a gorgeous purple, and I've compared this once to Yozakura, but it's actually very different from Sailor Shikura Yozakura. But I really like the way that this shades, and it flows really well out of my extra fine nib. So then I'm going to add a few drops to my Hobonichi cousin, and then using the sandwich bag, actually creating little inks splotches. And I love how random the splotches can be. Not one single page looks exactly the same as another page, but it also helps to bring out the shading qualities of the ink. And then I'm going to go ahead and write my to-do list for the day. I've really enjoyed using this in my journal because this type of swatching and decorating is really easy. And I'm also not using a lot of stickers. I'm using up the ink that I have. Next, I'm using my Rhodia notebook and I put down 3 drops of the ink and then swirl it around with the ink sample vial. And then I write in the name of the ink itself. So you can see here the way that the ink looks in my Rhodia paper once I've transcribed a couple of pages of Anne of Green Gables. This was a really fun ink to use and I absolutely loved it. The next ink is BirminghamPenCo Pitted Nickel, and this was actually a sample sent to me by Katie, and you can see here I actually had to take a piece of the Tomoe River paper and place it on top so I could do a proper swatch and do the swirling with the ink sample vial. So I actually inked it up in my Platinum 3776 with a fine nib, and you can see here that it actually flows really well out of this platinum fine nib. BirminghamPenCo inks I have found actually to be quite wet, which is why I chose to put it in my Platinum 3776. I wanted a little bit of a wetter ink for this bit stiffer, much finer nib. And then I'll put a few drops down here in my Hobonichi cousin. And what I loved about this ink is the way that the shading looks, but this green is a very foresty green with almost a hint of blue in the color, and I absolutely loved that. So here at the bottom of the page, adding a few more drops as well, and then doing the swatches with the sandwich bag. Such an easy way of swatching, but also inexpensive. It's a sandwich bag. We all should have sandwich bags around the house. And then here I am, I'm going to go ahead and write in my to-do list for the day. I did have a really good time using this ink and pen combination. However, I'm finding that the Platinum 3776 might just be a bit too fine and a bit too dry of a pen in general. So we'll see how I feel about it going forward. And then here I am placing a few drops in my Rhodia notebook, and this is where I am transcribing Anne of Green Gables. So I try to dedicate 2 pages of writing for Anne of Green Gables, so I really get a handle of how this pen and ink pairing work together. And in this paper, it felt drier. I'm finding that there's certain inks that feel drier on the Rhodia paper actually. It's very smooth, but it does feel drier. So here you can see the beautiful shading that happens with the Birmingham Pitted Nickel, but it also looks beautiful with the fine nib that comes in the Platinum 3776. Overall, a really beautiful green. The next ink is Monteverde Birthday Cake, and this one was sent to me by Miss Marilyn Darling. So placing a drop on the paper and swirling it with my ink sample vial. Look at that bright, I say bright, but it's such a vibrant purple. I really like it. And I have it inked up in my Narwhal Nautilus primary manipulation. This was a Pen Chalet exclusive, and I'm so glad that I got it. I'm trying to experiment with different ways of how I put the ink drops on the paper. So I'm experimenting with tiny drops and lots of ink, and getting the combination right is a work in progress. But I think the less ink I put down, the better, I guess, individual patterns I'm getting. So I'm trying out different ways of doing the splotches, but overall, I love the way these splatters really bring out the shading qualities of each of these inks. So here I am writing my to-do list in my Hobonichi Cousin, and I actually did enjoy the two together, but I think the extra fine nib that I had ground into the Narwhal Nautilus, I don't know if it was the best pairing with the Monteverde ink. I think, to me, it felt a little dry, and my specialized nib grind on this pen was ground to be a little bit wetter. And this ink felt a little bit dry to me, but maybe that's just me personally. Here I am swirling it in my, what book is this? My Rhodia notebook. And I like experimenting with the different types of paper and seeing the way that the pen and ink act on different types of paper and the smoothness of it. So being able to dedicate this much ink and this much writing to the pen and ink combination has been really nice. But I love the shading of this purple, and it's actually a really nice purple once, you know, you write with it with an extra fine nib, but I just found it maybe slightly too dry for my tastes. Day 12, here we have Dominant Industry Autumn Forest, and this was another ink sample sent to me by Miss Marilyn Darling, and it is gorgeous. Absolutely stunning. There was barely any left in the ink sample vial, so I had to be very careful with how much I used in all of my 30 inks 30 days. But look at the beautiful shimmer that's coming up here. I might need to buy a bottle. I've put it in my Pelican 140, and it just writes beautifully in this pen. This pen is a wet writer anyway, so I paired the two together, and I'm so glad that I did. This is a really pretty combination of the kind of I'm trying to say olive green and brown at the same time, olive brown, olive green with the shimmer, and it's just a beautiful flowing ink. Next, I place a few drops in my Hobonichi Cousin, and again, you can see I'm being very sparing with this ink and trying to get as good of a splatter as I can with what little ink I've put on the page, and it actually turned out beautifully, and I really love the way that these look. So putting another few drops on the bottom of the page and using my sandwich bag for the splatter effect. Journaling with this pen and ink combination was an absolute joy, and I'm really considering getting a bottle of this, especially since Leanne Likes also talked about how much she loves this ink, but it flowed out of this pen beautifully. I did wonder whether the shimmer would be consistent throughout the whole writing sample, and it wasn't. It really was more prominent at the beginning of the writing sample, and then towards the end it wasn't as much shimmer. It was more of the base color. And then here I am putting the ink in my Rhodia notebook. And with this particular ink sample, I was only able to do 1 page of transcribing before I ran out of ink completely. But I love the way that this looks on this paper. You can see the way that it's drying already and how the shimmer is pooling, but look at the different greens and pinks, and it's just such a gorgeous, beautiful color. Like, look at how bright that shimmer is. But in this writing sample, you can tell that the shimmer is really prominent at the beginning and then not so much throughout the rest of the sample. So we'll see. I really did love this pairing though. Day 13, we have Colorverse Q Zhang, another dusty pink type of color, and placing a drop here on my B6 Galen leather book. And look at that, it's beautiful. And I've inked this up in my Leonardo Momento Zero Grande 2.0 in the angel skin, and this combination was gorgeous. But look at the shading here, absolutely beautiful. So then I'm going to go ahead and write it in my listing of currently inked. And I really like the way that the ink flows out of this pen. And just a quick note as well, somebody asked me if I'm inking all of my pens for 30 inks 30 days. And actually, I'm only inking the pens that I am using for that time period. So only inking up the pens that I need for days 9 through 15. And I'm only putting enough ink in there to get me through what I need. So a page in my Hobonichi Cousin, 2 pages in my Rhodia, and just a little bit more to be able to do the quick writing samples. And by the end of the week, I clean all of those pens out so I don't have 30 pens inked by the end of the month, which would be way too overwhelming for me. So then putting a few drops in my Hobonichi Cousin, and I really do love this ink. Just the way that the shading, that the different colors of the pink, the dark and the light. I love this ink, and I'm so glad that I have a 4 ml sample of this. I'm hoping to ink this up for July and probably put it in a pen that I may use in my A6 5-year journal. We'll see. Looks like I got a little ink maybe on my leather cover, but that's okay. And it is actually lovely to write with it in my Leonardo Momento Zero Grande 2.0. This pen is slightly too big for me, and I don't think I would ever buy a Leonardo Momento Zero Grande size again, but I don't see myself ever selling. This pen is just so beautiful, and that rose gold nib, beautiful. And then putting some ink swatches into my Rhodia book and writing or transcribing samples from Anne of Green Gables. It's, for me, a really pleasurable experience to transcribe this book because, for one, I mean, I get to play with all the different inks, but 2, it's reading something from my childhood and also exercising my hand every day to write this much. Day 14 is Pilot Hiroshizuku Ama Iro, and I've had the sample for ages, and I'm only using it now. And this blue is bright, punchy, happy, and I really should look up what Ama Iro is, but somebody please let me know in the comments what Ama Iro stands for. But it is a beautiful, beautiful blue, very wet ink. Pilot Hiroshizuku inks are normally quite wet, and even here it hasn't fully dried yet. But I inked this up in my Pilot Kakuno with a calligraphy medium nib, and the combination together, the calligraphy medium nib really brought out the beautiful shading properties of this ink, but also the two together are just fun to use. The ink flowed out of this pen beautifully. So then putting it into my Hobonichi Cousin, there was way too much ink that I put on the page, as you can see here. So I actually used whatever was left on the sandwich bag instead of just putting new drops at the bottom. But journaling with it is just so fun. This calligraphy medium nib is lovely, but I think it might be slightly too big for my teeny tiny writing. And then putting a few drops into my Rhodia notebook. I loved writing with this pen and this ink in this notebook. It was a very smooth experience, great flow from the pen, and you see such great shading here. But you can also see the line variation in the calligraphy medium nib. Beautiful combination. And lastly, day 15 is Ferris Wheel Press Shangri-La. And I can't remember where I got this. I think it was a sample sent to me by Cecilia. And it is a brown ink with shimmer. And I've inked it in my Le Bon Tarocco Pinnacle pen. And I don't know, browns, it's a brown, but there's something very interesting about this brown, especially with that little bit of shimmer in there. And it's going to come out even more in the splatters in my Hobonichi Cousin, as well as in the Rhodia notebook. But so far, the writing experience with it flows well out of the pen, and it is quite smooth. So you can see how it pools really well, and it's very wet. I put so much on the paper, so I really need to, less is more with these splatters here. But you'll be able to see just even there, the shimmer and the green sheen. It's a fantastic brown, and I don't say that very often about browns, but it is a beautiful ink. I have a fine nib on this Le Bon Tarocco, and even with the shimmer, it actually flows really, really well. There was no clogging, although I did have to prime the feet a little bit, but otherwise really good together. And then here I am putting some circles in my Rhodia notebook. I, again, really liked this combination, especially for a shimmer ink. So far, the shimmer inks that I've tried with Ferris Wheel Press, they've been good actually in my fine or even extra fine nibs, but look at that shimmer, and then you can see the green sheen in there as well. A really, really pretty brown. But in the writing sample, you don't see the shimmer as much, and maybe because there wasn't a ton in my converter. So here are the finished circles in my B6 Galen leather notebook with the Tomoe River paper. We've got Wearingeul Jane Eyre, BirminghamPenCo Pitted Nickel. I had to put a piece of, or I cut out a piece of the Tomoe River paper to put on top because I made a mistake. Monteverde Birthday Cake, Dominant Industry Autumn Forest. I love that one. Colorverse Q Zhang, which I also love. Pilot Hiroshizuku Amairo, and Ferris Wheel Press Land of Shangri-La. And then there's all of the inks for days 9 through 15, and then the splatters, which I really love the way that those come out every week, because the way that I place them on there, you don't really know the way that the pattern is going to go, but then it just all works well together. Next we have the flip through in my journal. So there's day 9 with Wearingeul Jane Eyre, day 10 with BirminghamPenCo Pitted Nickel, day 11 with Monteverde Birthday Cake, day 12 with Dominant Industry Autumn Forest. Like that, this looks so cool with the shimmer there. And then day 13 with Colorverse Q Zhang, day 14 with Pilot Hiroshizuku Amairo, and day 15 with Ferris Wheel Press Shangri-La, Land of Shangri-La. And then lastly, a flip through in my Rhodia notebook where I transcribed 2 pages worth from Anne of Green Gables. So there is the Wearingeul Jane Eyre. I love this paper actually. It's so smooth and it's got a bit of a coating on it. I still love my Tomoe River paper, but it's nice to have a different experience with the Rhodia paper. Then BirminghamPenCo Pitted Nickel, Monteverde Birthday Cake. I don't know if I'm fully a fan of the Monteverde inks, but we'll see. We'll keep trying them. And then Dominant Industry Autumn Forest. I was only able to get 1 page because there was such a small sample, and I was able to finish all of it. And then Colorverse Q Zhang.
I love this ink, and there's so much left of the sample, so I can't wait to use that again. Pilot Hiroshizuku Amairo. It's such a bright, happy blue, but I also love the way that it looks with the calligraphy medium nib. And then lastly, Ferris Wheel Press, Land of Shangri-La. It's a really pretty shimmery brown. But that is it for me for days 9 through 15 of 30 days, 30 inks. Let me know your thoughts of the inks that I used for these last 7 days. So the next group will be days 16 through 23. Gosh, my brain. Days 16 through 23. And I'm really enjoying this process. Like this week felt like I was rushing to get everything done, but it was still so fun to be able to do it all. And it's been fun doing 30 inks, 30 days so far. Thanks again so much for watching, and thank you guys so much for all of the feedback that I received on my first video. And again, thanks for watching. Have a great day.